Cars 2 is not a dumb action comedy. I mean, it's an action comedy, and let's just be frank, it's kind of dumb in parts, but as a whole, I can say confidently that it's not a dumb action comedy. Maybe I should start again. I've always found it interesting how dramatically different the tone of the two Cars movies are, and how much of that is caused by the change in main character. With a main character like Lightning McQueen, you get a down-to-earth redemption story where he slowly learns to change his ways. Switch to Mater, however, and you suddenly get his fast-paced, wacky joint with a lesson about being true to yourself. Both ultimately have character-driven messages at their hearts, they just go about it in completely different ways. Cars 2 is much less interested in the nitty-gritty nuts and bolts of the plot, and is more focused on taking us on an exhilarating journey. I admit, I'm a little cynical in general about doing a world tour for a sequel movie, just because sequel movies do this all the time. It's like, can't think of something to do? Just go to Europe. Madagascar did it, the Vacation movies did it, Ocean's 11 did it, the recent Muppets did it, and Cars 2 did it too. It creates a bit of a problem for them in this example, since Radiator Springs was such a central component to the first film. It forces them to start making the hard decisions of which characters to take along and which ones have to stay back at home. A character like Sally, for example, ends up totally getting the shaft, relegated to a minor love triangle tease. Sally is a character tied to Lightning McQueen, and a shift away from Lightning McQueen gives Sally nothing to do. It makes sense how this happens, but is disappointing nonetheless. To their credit, Cars 2 does try to give them some action in the finale, letting everyone show up again and kick some bumper with their special moves. But their appearance feels very transparent to me, almost like Pixar knew people would complain about their non-presence. If Radiator Springs is not important to this movie, let's just call a spade a spade. I do like how they reference Doc, however, paying respect to the late Paul Newman. It's classy they chose not to recast him, and I like that they at least gave him a moment. The decision to go on the road does offer Cars 2 several advantages that the first movie simply did not have. It obviously gives them a greater variety of locations and set pieces for them to show off, leading to a more diverse set of jokes. Pixar is great at world building in general, and it's fascinating to see what a world of Cars would look like. How would Japanese culture translate to this reality, for example? What would Paris look like? How about Italy? How about London? Each location gets its own montage, showing off the awesome beauty of each country. There are moments, of course, where it feels like Pixar is just checking off the boxes of nationality jokes. Like you see Japan and you kind of expect the vending machine joke, or the kabuki joke, or the fancy Japanese toilet joke. It's almost like Sofia Coppola directed this part of the movie. The same thing could be argued for the other three countries. At the same time, adapting these cliched jokes to a world of Cars is still interesting to look at visually and provides a unique spin on things. There's still a sense of discovery there. I had never thought about it before, but yeah, I totally want to see what a British pub would look like in this world. I don't care if this joke had been done. Ratatouille references? Yes please. There's an overall higher emphasis on fun in this movie. It plays closer to the strength of the cast, in my opinion. You have a blazing fast race car in Lightning McQueen, so let's just build these beautiful racetracks for him to tackle. The decision to move away from NASCAR format to an F1 racing one is a good one, as it gives them a little more eye candy and a more varied track to show off. I especially love the one in Italy with its long exposed ramps and sweeping turns. That coastline is absolutely gorgeous. Unfortunately, other than the breathtaking racing scenes, I do feel like Lightning McQueen's role is a little thankless, being a mere pawn in a much larger game. His main purpose is to kickstart Mater's story of self-discovery. Once Mater gets sent on his way, the only job McQueen has is to fight with John Turturro. Which, to their credit, they play off each other pretty well. Other than that, he's just used to underline the theme of the movie. We get to meet Luigi's relatives, learn a little more about their backstory, and question why McQueen would want Mater to be anyone else. I find the execution of this scene to be a little ham-fisted and obvious, but it's probably a necessary one. Lightning McQueen is the one embarrassed by Mater, therefore he's the one who has to deliver the film's final message. Now, the old chestnut of be yourself is obviously not a very novel one for an animated movie. Probably a third to half of all Western animation revolves around this theme to some degree. At the same time, it makes for a good companion piece to the first Cars movie. The first one is all about redemption, in which Lightning McQueen learns to stop being such a horrible jerk. Interestingly, this movie, which is all about old, rundown, and uncultured Mater, takes the opposite stance that Mater is perfectly fine already. It becomes more about others accepting him for who he is, and most importantly, Mater being confident in himself. Mater wears his dents and dings with pride, viewing them as memories of a past experience with his friends. I like that Mater, much like McQueen in the first movie, is eventually forced to confront how others view him. But it loses a little bit of gusto here, when the moral is that Mater is basically awesome and screw everyone else. There isn't much accountability for the things Mater does wrong or doesn't understand culturally. I think a more nuanced message would allow for Mater to be more confident in who he is, but also consider how his actions can inadvertently drive people away. Cars 2 just basically lets Mater off the hook. Maybe a more nuanced message is too much to drop on a character like him. The way it was done just seems a little basic. I will give them credit though that this self-esteem moral does line up well with their discussion of lemons, which is one of the central motifs of the movie. It shows another example of Pixar's thoughtfulness, that they can take the time to set up things in advance. Literally the first scene after the cold open is the one in which Mater tows down a broken down car and gets told how nice he is to lemons. It's almost like Pixar is yelling at us, "Hey, this is a movie about lemons." The choice to make Cars 2 about lemons is a borderline brilliant one, fitting in perfectly with Mater as the main character. You can kinda see their thought process here, thinking about how Mater is personally involved with towing down broken cars. So it begs the question of how does the world of Cars work? In that, is this a world where some cars are inherently built poorly and are, by default, worse than others? What kind of message is that? Some cars are basically doomed to be second-class citizens? Now, Cars 2 doesn't really get that deep in discussing this topic, somewhat disappointingly, but I appreciate that they at least picked what would be a relevant social issue in this world. It's also smart because it's a topic that Mater is well versed in and can personally contribute to. He ends up being a credible participant in the plot. Well, in some ways. We'll talk about that stuff in a moment. But when Mater identifies a set of parts from just a picture, you can kinda believe that he would know. It's totally in his wheelhouse. In addition, it makes sense that the villains would have a tow truck, allowing for Mater to further entrench himself into the action. That being said, the whole secret agent angle of it is handled really sloppily sometimes and can hurt the credibility of the story as a whole. The idea to put Mater in these crazy situations is a good one, but it feels like Pixar struggled with where to draw the line. They're constantly playing a game of justifying how two British agents are smart and competent, but are somehow unable to discover that Mater is an average Joe. They do a decent job with the tracking device of getting Mater in the door, and then letting him add his 2 cents with the intelligence. It's just, they keep the confusion going on a little too long, making Finn and Shiftwell feel like total idiots for not seeing it. I don't buy it at all. I feel like the point where they should have done the reveal is during the Paris sequence. They're putting together the plan to put Mater undercover. It'll be totally reasonable for him to finally speak up. Then they could very begrudgingly proceed with the operation anyway because of time or personnel constraints. It would add a layer of tension to their operation if they suddenly knew they were relying on a total amateur. The way they do it, where the reveal is in the death trap, it feels way too late to really matter. Their surprise ends up feeling very understated overall because of the situation they are in. I feel like this setup should have led to a bigger oh crap moment. The secret agent story does lead to a lot of fun and inventive action scenes, giving this movie a different flavor than a lot of Pixar's other stuff. Probably the closest comparison would be The Incredibles in terms of its high-flying action scenes. Finn and Shiftwell are basically superheroes in this, being able to fly and swim underwater and drive up walls and stuff. It's funny though, because I can kinda get behind all their technical contraptions and whatever, but seeing Finn start doing karate moves is where things get weird. I've never seen a car punch or kick someone before. In general though, all the action scenes are shot very well and feel very true to the roots of the Cars series. With all these fast cars and stuff, I kinda just want to see them fly around ramps and do crazy stunts and stuff. Michael Caine delivers a very Michael Caine performance, while Emily Mortimer does fine as Shiftwell. I like that they gave her character a small arc, in which she starts as a technical recon type and eventually blossoms into a confident field agent. Her flirtation with Mater is pretty forgettable in general, but their romance isn't really a focal point, so I don't really mind that it's half-baked. Speaking of half-baked, maybe we should talk about that whole all-in-all thing and Sir Miles Axelrod. I think it's cool that they put in a discussion about clean energy versus fossil fuels in this movie, as it would be a relevant conversation topic in this world. The pseudoscience magic thing with the electromagnetic rays or whatever works okay as an evil villain kind of thing to do. In general, most of the minor villains are fine. Professor Zundop is a hilarious sort of Bond villain this movie needs. But I hate the final reveal that it was Sir Miles Axelrod behind the whole thing. It is so dumb and annoying. They basically went with the new Coke conspiracy and decided that the character has no incentive to sabotage All in All has to be the one who sabotages All in All. A character who basically has cornered every part of the energy market and is going to get rich either way, but no, he opts to go through this complicated plan to potentially make slightly more money. I get the timing of the oil discovery changes things, but it just strikes me as weak. They don't telegraph his potential motivation in any meaningful way. And what's worse about it is they set up this intrigue about who this mysterious leader is, yet by the end of the movie, there is literally no one else it could be. It's not anyone from Radiator Springs, it's not the secret agents, it's not any of the villains we've seen. Who else could it be? Francesco? Yeah, right. I remember thinking at the time that it obviously has to be Axelrod through process elimination, even though it didn't make a lick of sense. They didn't set up an alternative solution to add intrigue or distract the audience. I like that they went through the effort of dropping a clue with the oil spill, showing it twice even, but the whole thing is for naught when you only have one potential suspect. In fact, I would argue that the entire climax of this movie is a bit of a mess the moment they step one tire into England. They set up an elaborate death trap for Mater, except not really because they expect him to escape, and therefore armed him with a bomb, which leads to a big chase through the London streets as Lightning McQueen moronically confuses a bomb with being the bomb. The poor communication between these two characters is starting to get under my skin at this point. And then they culminate in the Axelrod reveal, which as discussed is really annoying. There are some good stuff, like Finn's showdown with the Professor, or the tense standoff in front of the Queen, but overall, the climax is reliant on characters either being too cute with their plans, or characters just being too stupid to live. And for once, it isn't Mater's fault. As a whole, Cars 2 feels like a product that is very true to Mater's character. It almost feels like Pixar actually asked Mater what kind of movie he'd like to be in, and he just told them. Like Mater himself, Cars 2 comes off as being very breezy, action-packed, and most importantly, fun. Mater is the kind of character who looks at the big picture of things and doesn't sweat the small details. He is more concerned with just trying to make people laugh and have a good time. And Cars 2, sometimes to its detriment, does the exact same thing. Lightning McQueen chasing after Mater, not understanding the bomb, is really ridiculous, but that's not really the point. It feels like a movie that is willing to be a little silly just so they can go for a joke. It is relentless in its quest to make you laugh. And honestly, I'm kind of okay with that. Cars 2 is Mater's film. It belongs to him. I would personally love it if the film had the emotional depths of something like Up or Inside Out. That would be awesome. But I don't think that's what Mater is about, and it wouldn't work if you forced it. Mater definitely does have some depth to him, but he is more about just living in the moment and having a good time with his friends. Just look at the ending credits, for example. Mater is a character who already knows what he wants. That being said, I would contend that no, Cars 2 is not a dumb action comedy. A dumb action comedy does not have motifs. It does not care about characterization. It does not take its time to discuss its themes. It most certainly has its share of dumb plot moments, let's just be real. And it's certainly one of Pixar's most uneven films. However, in this reviewer's humble opinion, it puts in enough effort to end up on the correct side of the line. There is still a whiff of that thoughtfulness from the first Cars movie. It achieves exactly what it sets out to do. It's not complicated or anything, but then again, neither is Mater. Now if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna go have a scoop of that delicious pistachio ice cream. Thanks for watching.